All right, thank you very much, Palmer. Thank you, Chris. Thank you to Tim Alters and Lee Sasser who helped greet today. I'd like to start with a few pop-ups. Mike Crumpler has a pop-up. Mike Crumpler is busy at the moment.
I can do it.
Got it? Okay, sorry about that.
Thank you, President Dane. This last announcement, June 22nd, coming up at 9:30. We're going to be meeting at our law firm at 4811 Atlantic Boulevard, 2 blocks down from Episcopal on the same side of the road, going toward the beach. So please come join us. And I just thought of something today. This, in the past, was a great opportunity for young high school students to get their community service hours. So our members would bring their children to these events, the book stuffing events, and the children would be able to get their community service hours. We'd write a nice letter to the principal saying how they helped us during this time. So please bring your children if they need their community service hours. And we'll look forward to seeing you Saturday, January 22nd. It'll be upstairs at our law library. So we'll be there at 9:30 Saturday morning.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you for all your efforts for Read Right from the start. We appreciate that very much. A great program for those of you who have never participated before. Please think about doing so this time around. I'd like to call it Lee Davis. We have a raffle. I'm told that the number is ever increasing. Our contribution to
Covering over at $3,500.
$3,500. Okay.
Half goes to review services and the other half. So, I did verify President Dane. She's still in here in the Queen of Hearts, and we're down to just a few cards.
People are starting to wonder.
All right. Yes, I know. I confirm. All right. For one of the tickets for us. All right. All right, we're trying to do 3 drawings today, President.
3 drawings.
Yeah. All right, the first winning number last one is 5729. 5729. Oh, Alberta.
Hey, Alberta.
All right, Alberta. Let's keep going. Kathy Cole. Can I draw my own? Yeah. Okay. Last one is 5666.
536.
Yeah.
It's yours. Yours. That's the one I set aside for you.
So that I
Do you remember where the Queen of Hearts is? That's the question.
Should I shuffle them again real quick?
All right, William.
Oh.
Shuffle the deck real quick.
Oh, okay, shuffle.
It looks like you've got about a 1 in 10 chance.
Yes,
Tell you, we're getting close.
better than the lottery. My first time.
One more time. Hey.
Ah, all right.
All right.
Let's do one more real quick.
One more.
All right. Let me see. Sean. All right. Last 4 digits, 5675.
5675.
Don't have for me.
All right.
There's book for everybody.
All right, well, 0 for 3. What do you know?
Be a little more?
All right, so I think one of the things that we've talked about, I was talking with Patty before the meeting started today. This is one of the longer running fundraisers, certainly in club history. I think this thing started in Sean's year, and we're about to run into Tim's year. So I'm thinking that maybe we draw next meeting until we get a winner. I mean, you know, let's think about that. That way we can figure out what we're doing with the money. Everybody bring your money for tickets next week and let's see if we can get it.
Yeah.
Get it done. So thank you for all of your. And then you take it out of the deck before people go to choose, right? Is that? No? In any event, yeah, no, let's try to do that next week and we'll get some money given away. Thank you for all of your effort on that, Lee. We really do appreciate it. And fellow Rotarians, be sure to sign up for President's Night. It is June 26th here at Timuquana. There will be no lunch meeting that day. It is a Wednesday. Very exciting time for all of us. We will turn things over to President-elect Tim Johnson. And we are all very much looking forward to that. So I'd like to call on past President Kathy Cold for Family of Rotary.
All right, well, there aren't any birthdays this week. Are there any anniversaries or anybody have anything that they want to share?
I do.
Yeah, Pat.
Everybody. I'm happy to share that I have a thought. I
Yeah.
started a couple weeks ago with a cultural festival. So I won't be doing the draw.
Thanks, Mary Pat. Anybody else? All right. Another try. Ma'am? Oh, sorry.
I just wanted to share that last Monday, my wife and I over there, 24th Way.
Also. No more hands? All right. A man was cleaning out his garage and he came upon an old lamp. He figured, what the heck? He took out the lamp, rubbed it off, and sure enough, a genie popped out. I will grant you one wish, the genie said. And the man said, anything I want, anything, said the genie. And the man said, well, I'm afraid of flying, but I've always wanted to visit Hawaii. I'd like you to build me a bridge to Hawaii so I can drive there and visit. A bridge to Hawaii, the genie said. That's a really tough request. The water is up to a mile deep. The swells in that part of the Pacific sometimes reach 25 feet. The bridge would have to be thousands of miles long. The amount of concrete and steel to accomplish that feat will have to come from somewhere. It will be nearly impossible. Can I implore you to think of a different wish? The man thought for a while and he said, okay, then. I've always had trouble with women. Could you grant me the ability to understand women? And the genie said, so how many lanes you want on that bridge? That concludes my report.
Thank you, past President Kathy. I'd like to call on William Milne, there's our Sergeant at Arms.
Thank you, President Dane. We don't have any visiting Rotarians today unless some came in the past few minutes. Any visiting Rotarians? Well, we do have several guests today. Charlie Petzer, will you please introduce your guest?
He's my good prop. He's a sheriff professional at Duval County Public.
All right, welcome. Glad to have you. Mark Eldridge.
This is my daughter, Trinity Eldridge. She graduated from with a bachelor's degree. And she's looking for a job if anyone's hiring.
Congratulations. Young Milne,
My guest today is mine and son William's great friend, CPA Russell Bratcher, who I invited to come specifically to hear from Alan Bliss of the President's office. Certainly, and to learn more about
President Mary Pat Wallmeyer as a guest.
Thank you. This is Janet Crabtree, she's my partner in crime at the Cultural Center, or the Cultural Council, and I was able to bring her with me from camp. So,
Welcome.
happy.
That's the name that was our partner.
All right.
Thank you very much, William. Society. Mr. Bliss has served as CEO of the Jacksonville Historical Society that does business as the Jacksonville History Center since January of 2018. Prior to then, he served as JHC's Board of Directors and taught U.S. history at the University of North Florida in Jacksonville. His courses included urban history, maritime history, the Great Depression and the New Deal, civil rights, and pro seminars on public history, all of which emphasize Jacksonville. Fellow Rotarians, please give a warm welcome to Alan Bliss.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for that welcome. Good afternoon, everyone. It's an honor to be here at West Jacksonville Rotary. It's an honor to speak to any of Jacksonville's many Rotary clubs, and I have spoken to, I think, just about all of them. In some cases, apparently certain Rotary Club program directors, being gluttons for punishment or coming up dry for guest speakers, have actually been emboldened to invite me back for a second round of punishment. This club invited me before, so the last time I spoke at West Jacksonville Rotary, this club was meeting at a Ramada Inn out in the White House neighborhood. There was a restaurant in the hotel that had an aviation theme. But I guess that's been, how many Rotarians in this club remember that venue? Okay, well, it's not that long ago then. The program director then was Jim Overton. I don't see him in the audience here today. He insists he's still a Rotarian, but he's probably out busy collecting taxes from poor citizens of Jacksonville County or somewhere today. Rotarians are great citizens, every one of them that I have encountered. And that matters because citizenship is one of the virtues, one of the values that we really advocate and try to help strengthen through the study of public history. And in a moment, our mission statement, organizational mission statement, will show up. And I can enlarge on that. I can actually recite the mission from memory. That's no small feat but I had to shorten it recently to make it easy to digest. The mission of the Jacksonville History Center, as we are known now, is to strengthen citizenship through public history education. The more people know about the place where they live or work, whether it's their home, their block, their neighborhood, their city, state, their country, the more they know about that place, the more they know about the people and events of its past, the more invested we all become in that place, psychically, intellectually, emotionally, financially, spiritually, almost any way you choose to consider it. The more we become concerned with its well-being, the more we understand that we are the stewards and custodians of our place in the world at the moment. When we think about the fact that this city and its neighborhoods and its places are they're the result, the legacy of the people and events that came before us, the more we appreciate that, the more we understand that that this place will be our legacy to the future generations, to the people who come after us. So for that reason, I argue that the study of history is not just about looking back nostalgically at the past and thinking about what's come before. It's actually being thoughtful about the future. I think of history as being like navigating a boat on open water. Sometimes out of sight of land, sometimes with some landmarks on the horizon, some points of reference. But a navigator always has to understand how they got to where they are. And in the civic life of a city or a country, history is how we got to where we are. History is the study and the process of understanding the significance of the people and events in the past. So history as a discipline is like navigation, one way to look at it. And that's an analogy that I hang on to, because navigation is not just about figuring out where you came from, but where you're going, right? So understanding something about this place is a good way to think about how we want this place to develop in the future. Jacksonville commemorated its 200th anniversary in 2022. And in thinking about that previous 200 years, during which this place became a community known by the name Jacksonville, that animated us to encourage people to think about the next 200 years. Not a far-fetched idea. That was 2 years ago. Now there's only 198 years to go before we celebrate the city's 400th anniversary, right? The Jacksonville Historical Society was established in 1929 in the lobby of the Carling Hotel downtown. There were over 200 charter members, a diverse group, men, women, racially diverse as well. And that occurred 28 years after the most significant event in Jacksonville's history. What am I talking about? Doug Milne is exempt from answering this one. He's heard me before. The Great Fire. Well, maybe I don't have too much to teach this audience of Rotarians after all. Anyway. Yeah, the Great Fire that happened on May 3rd, 1901. I argue the most influential event in the city's history, not because of what happened that day. Yes, it was a great tragedy. Yes, dozens and dozens of blocks were burned over, lots of private property lost, buildings destroyed, lives disrupted, economic devastation. All of that happened on that day. But the importance of the event really has to do with what happened afterward. It turned Jacksonville into what appeared to be a blank canvas. It drew innovative architects, designers, engineers, developers, builders, contractors to Jacksonville to do what they had seen done or knew had happened in Chicago after that city's Great Fire. It basically recreated the skyline of a new city within a really condensed period of time, just about 15 years after the Great Fire. By the end of the Great War, by the end of the decade of the teens and the beginning of the 1920s, Jacksonville, to many people, to most people, seemed new. It was a new city. It had been basically recreated out of the ashes of what had stood before. That's one of the things that makes Jacksonville kind of unlike almost any other city in the American South, unlike most other cities in the country. That's one of our distinguishing characteristics. And that surge of development took place, as I say, within about 2 decades or so. And it also happened to coincide with great changes that were happening in American life. One of the most influential had to do with technologies of telecommunications, aviation, and automobiles. Jacksonville emerged into that setting and that environment. So the people of the 1920s in Jacksonville had a complicated relationship with the city's past. And I think that's what entered into their idea about creating a Jacksonville Historical Society in 1929, which they chartered then and now has been in existence since then. And now we are in our, see if I can do the math quickly in my head, 96 years into our existence, 94 in our 95th year, at least. Yeah, 95th year and closing in on our centennial in 2029. We recently renamed the organization the Jacksonville History Center for a couple of reasons. Number one, because next slide, please. Number one, because we are rebooting and reestablishing what we do and how we do it. We're creating a museum and exhibit venue to go along with our archives, our research library, and our programming for special events. We're doing that on the campus of a property that we own downtown on the east side of Hogan's Creek, right across the street from the ViStar Veterans Memorial Arena. The image here shows the 2 buildings on that property. The building at the lower right is the old St. Luke's Hospital building. There's another image of it now there. That was the first building built in Florida purposefully to be a hospital, built in 1878 on the National Register of Historic Places. And that is where my offices are, the offices of my staff, our archives, our research library. Most everything we do takes place within the 2 stories of that building, each story containing about 2,000 square feet. So we're shoehorned into a pretty compact site. The other building on the property, if you could back up, please, for a moment to the proceedings, back up one more, back up again. There we go. The other building on the site, that 3-story red brick building, was built in 1920 as a factory. It was built by a company called the Florida Casket Company. And yeah, they built caskets and coffins. They served morticians and funeral directors all over the American Southeast. And the building served in that role until 1966. It's 3 stories. Each floor plate consists of 4,500 square feet. With the help of a large number of very generous donors, some who've given as little as $100, some who have given as many as hundreds of thousands of dollars individually, and along with a significant direct appropriation from the city of Jacksonville, we have fully funded a $3.4 million project to renovate and activate that building as museum and exhibition space on the 1st floor, performance and event venue on the 2nd floor, and a new state-of-the-art archive and research facility on the 3rd floor. This is the most ambitious undertaking in the history of this organization, but it's just a small step in the direction of what our ambitions point to and in the direction of what we think Jacksonville needs. Next slide, please. And next one, please. That shows the old St. Luke's Hospital in a sketch at the time that it was new and a photograph that shows it when it was undergoing its first major renovation in the 1970s. And next slide, please. And there is an image of a photograph, actually a glass plate negative from our collection. It was taken by a pioneering photographer in the early 20th century, and it's an example of one of the well over 100,000 historic photographs of Jacksonville that are in our photo archive. That's just one part of what our collections have to offer. There's no other archive like that that relates just to Jacksonville, Florida. We were fortunate at the time that the Florida Times Union had to move out of its headquarters on Riverside Avenue to acquire that newspaper's photo archive, which consisted of some 40,000 plus photos, which really made a big increase in the size of our photo collection. Next image, please. We also operate out of 2 historic buildings on the east side of the ViStar Veterans Memorial Arena, Old St. Andrew's Church, consecrated in 1888 as an Episcopal church when that was an entirely residential community, and deconsecrated by the Episcopal Diocese in the 1950s, when the St. Andrew's congregation moved over across the river to the Arlington neighborhood. The house next to it was built in the 1880s also, and that was the house of the James Merrill family. Merrill was the family name of what was at that time and through much of the 20th century, the largest industrial employer in this city, Merrill Stevens Shipbuilding. Tens of thousands of people worked at Merrill Stevens Shipbuilding, especially during the years of the Great War and the Second World War. The Merrill family home has been moved twice to its present location. Both of these buildings are owned by the city of Jacksonville, but managed under a long-term lease by the Jacksonville History Center. We use the church for public events and speaker series, lectures. The museum house is actually open for tours by reservation, by group reservation, and our docent Nancy Gandy is delighted to show off the interior of the house, which has been furnished in the style of a upper middle class family of about the year of the Great Fire. Next slide, please. We also use Old St. Andrew's Church for what has become one of Jacksonville's most beloved annual traditions. Each year in the month of December, we use the church to stage the annual Gingerbread House Extravaganza. Dozens upon dozens of original gingerbread structures are created all by volunteers. Christmas trees, over a dozen, are custom decorated according to a different theme each year by the Junior League of Jacksonville. And sometimes upwards of 5,000 people go through the exhibit in just about 2 weeks during the month of December. We're open before and after the Christmas holiday. And grandparents, parents, children, grandchildren come back year after year. It has become a tradition. They bring their family visitors that are in town for the holidays. If we do anything differently from the way we have done it in years past, we hear about it from people who have been coming back that often. Next slide, please. I mentioned our speaker series events. At least once a month, sometimes more than once in the course of a month, we have a educational presentation featuring a speaker who is a knowledgeable expert on some aspect of Jacksonville's history. And we try to make the topic relevant to this city, but we put it into the context of the larger themes of American history more generally. Jacksonville, because it's such a big, complicated city and a place with a deep past, but also a place of modernity, this is a great place to teach almost any topic there is in U.S. history and sometimes in transnational or world history. It's a seaport city. It's cosmopolitan. It's demographically and ethnically diverse. It is complicated in almost any way you care to look at it. And that makes it right territory to tell complicated stories. I think Jacksonville is oftentimes seen by people who have never visited here or never lived here. It's misunderstood. It tends to be misread as a place that is culturally and in some ways in other ways retrograde. It is seen sometimes as racially or ethnically or culturally homogenous. And it is very different from all of those things. And I think all of us who have had the good fortune to either grow up here or move here, as I did in 2006, have come to understand that we're lucky. I feel lucky to be here. I was hired to come teach at UNF, as you heard earlier. And so I feel as though I kind of fell backwards into living in what I think is just the greatest place in the United States to live. I feel fortunate. John Delaney sometimes says that Jacksonville is climatologically at just the right latitude and longitude. And that's one of the benefits of being here. Next slide, please. So I mentioned the Great Fire. This is another image from our collection. This is one of my favorite images from the aftermath of the Great Fire. An enlargement of this image hangs in the hallway outside the City Council chambers in City Hall. This photo shows the day after the Great Fire and the then mayor of Jacksonville, J.E.T. Bowden, standing there surveying the ashes of his city, enjoying a stogie while he assesses the damage and the outcome. But it gives a good image of the feelings of a lot of the people of the city and the devastation of the aftermath. Next slide, please. We commemorate the anniversary of the Great Fire each May. Now, we started during the pandemic with an annual 5K Great Fire Run. It's a good opportunity to tell the story of the fire. It's a fundraiser for our organization. The run starts and ends at Old St. Andrew's Church, and the route of the 5K run roughly traces parts of the boundaries of the Great Fire District. Next image, please. This is a map not from our archive, but from the Florida State Archives, the Florida Memory Project. But it gives you an idea of the small size of Jacksonville relative to Duval County. This image from 1906 illustrates a relatively compact city. And that helps illustrate why the Great Fire was so devastating to Jacksonville. It was basically downtown, and the Great Fire devastated downtown. But it puts you in the place and gives you an idea about how far the city was from the river entrance. You know, one of the arguments that the people who helped establish Jacksonville made for putting a city here was its proximity to the ocean and its place on the river. In June of 1822, a group of residents of this area on the lower St. Johns River sent a petition to the then Secretary of State, John Quincy Adams, asking him to designate this place as a customs port of entry, and they identified the place as Jacksonville. That's the first record that we have of this place being known by that name. June 15th, 1822 was the date of the petition, so we measured Jacksonville's establishment from that date. How am I doing on time?
You're doing great.
Okay, good. Yeah, the president said that I could only speak for an hour and a half, so I'll try not to use that much time. Next slide, please.
And you have about 15 minutes.
That's an 1853 chart of the entrance to the river. And it helps illustrate one of the under-recognized stories about this place. And one of the things that we try to bring out so that people understand its sometimes invisible past. The entrance to the river used to be almost unpredictable, very difficult to navigate for vessels that drew anything more than about 5 or 6 feet because of the ever-shifting sandbars that blocked the entrance to the river. Next slide, please. And it became a project of local residents, especially led by a physician, oddly enough, Dr. Abel Baldwin. Anybody know what place in Duval County is named for Dr. Baldwin? The town by that name commemorates him. He was a civic booster and an advocate for deepening a ship channel at the entrance to the river so that this could really become a place that lived up to its potential as a seaport. His efforts fell on deaf ears through the 1850s, the 1860s, of course, interrupted by the Civil War. Not until the 1870s did the idea begin to gain traction. Next slide, please. As vessels like this continued to struggle to keep up a routine schedule of navigation in and out of the river, the people of Jacksonville got wind of an innovative engineer from the Midwest. Next slide, please. This guy, anybody from St. Louis in this audience? If you were, you would recognize the name of James Eads. The Eads Bridge that he designed still crosses the Mississippi at St. Louis. The first bridge to cross the river that far south below its intersection with the Missouri River. And it was a big deal. It was an ambitious span that really made a mark on the development of the city and on the development of commerce west of the Mississippi. Next slide, please. Captain Eads, as he was known, he wasn't a captain, he wasn't a mariner, he wasn't never in the military, he never went to engineering school, he had no credentials at all, but he was smart, innovative, thoughtful, resourceful, and ambitious. And after the success of the Eads Bridge project, he was recruited by the Port of New Orleans to help them solve a problem of navigation in and out of the Mississippi River. Same issue, silting obstructed the river entrance. Captain Eads came up with a plan to sink wooden pilings and put timbers on either side of the river at a narrow point in the Southwest Pass area and channelize the river so that currents would naturally dredge out the bottom and deepen the river. It worked. And the people of Jacksonville heard about that and thought, we need that guy here. He saw a similar situation caused by different natural forces, different currents, different dynamics, but still used the same solution to design rock jetties that were built on either side of the river entrance and that still stand to this day. I think those jetties are some of the most architecturally significant, certainly in terms of engineering, some of the most important infrastructure anywhere in Northeast Florida. There you see them under construction. In the early years, every piece of granite was shipped down to Florida from elsewhere and carried out to Mayport on a railroad line, shifted over onto a barge, and then manually placed where they now extend upwards of a mile out into the ocean, but they channelize the river entrance and make navigation reliable. Next slide, please. And that chart shows in black at the roughly 1 o'clock position how those jetties lie in the present day, or more recently, that's from 1918. And next slide, please. And that's a more contemporary image. Next slide, please. And there's an aerial image that shows the entrance. Anybody who's a boater probably is familiar with those jetties and also is aware that they can be hazardous because of the strong currents and strong wave action that forms around them. But they're still what makes it possible for Jacksonville to be one of the most important transportation logistics centers, certainly on the East Coast of the United States, and one of the most important anywhere in the United States. The shipping container traffic from Jacksonville is critical to this area's economy. My estimate is that about 1/3 of the political economy of Jacksonville rests on its traffic through the port of Jacksonville, mainly the container terminal at Blood Island, operated by Jacksport. Next slide, please. Transportation, always important, and a railroad nexus helped make the seaport possible. And this is another historic image from our photo collection. You can't quite see it, I don't think, in the image here because of the light, but the building at the upper left at roughly the 11 o'clock position is the Jacksonville train station, the Jacksonville terminal, built in 1919. A grand terminal that really captured Jacksonville's ambitions as I said earlier, a new growing place in the aftermath of the Great Fire. And that terminal still stands and continues to be used today. It was adapted into a great sustainable new convention center, the Prime Osborne Convention Center, that lies just south of the La Villa neighborhood. Next slide, please. Another image from our historic photo collection. Is there, nobody in this audience is old enough to remember what that was, do they?
Cohen Brothers.
Cohen Brothers Department Store, now used as Jacksonville City Hall, known by some as the Great House of Pain downtown in Jacksonville. But a historic landmark and a great example of the adaptive reuse of a historic structure used in the 21st century for a purpose that it was never intended for. But that's part of what we do at the Jacksonville History Center. We advocate for historic buildings to be converted to a use that makes sense in the 21st century. That's what helps give a place its identity. And this is a classic example. The buildings that we occupy, another example of that advocacy. Each year, next slide, please. Each year we release in May, National Historic Preservation Month, a list of Jacksonville's most endangered buildings. We do that to call attention to the structures that we think, number one, are at risk for any one of a number of reasons. Either they're deteriorating or they're economically obsolete. And number two, to help use that as a way to advocate for conversion, adaptation, and reuse. That strengthens the identity of a place. Well, Jacksonville's historic identity is more rich, it's more complicated, and it's more interesting, I argue, than that of any other place in Florida. The city is older than any of its peer cities. By peer cities, I'm thinking of Tampa, St. Petersburg, Orlando, and Miami. Jacksonville has more history than any of them, and it's more interesting and more influential and more significant history. But all of our peer cities do more with their history than we do. Why that is always an interesting conversation, and I have that conversation year in and year out with many people and hear lots of explanations. I think because it is such a complicated place, that's one of the explanations. It's not the only thing, but the city deserves more, and that's part of our mission. That's part of the work that we do. This is an example of what Tampa has done. That's the Tampa Bay History Center on Seddon Channel downtown in the Channelside district, in between their Tampa Bay Lightning hockey arena and the Florida Aquarium. Next slide, please. Another image of the Tampa Bay History Center. This is a roughly 44,000 square foot, $60 million project devoted to the public history of Tampa and its region. Next slide, please. St. Petersburg has its Museum of History also on the downtown waterfront next to the approach to its Grand Pier. The image at the right shows their public meeting space with a pioneering aircraft suspended over the meeting area, so they get efficient use out of their space. St. Petersburg claims to be the birthplace of commercial aviation because that seaplane, a Benoit single-engine seaplane, took off from St. Pete carrying the first paying passenger known to have taken his life in his hands and gone up on a commercial airline flight. The flight took 30 minutes. The passenger was the then mayor of St. Petersburg, and the flight ended in the waters just off of downtown Tampa. So the people in Tampa say, yeah, Tampa is actually the birthplace of commercial aviation. That's where the plane landed. So that's an inner city rivalry. Next slide, please. In Orlando, a 1927 vintage Orange County courthouse is now the Orange County History Center. And you can see that they celebrate the identity of that place with images of tourism, travel, and associating its long history with its modern brand associated with the Magic Kingdom and tourism, international tourism. Next image, please. In Miami, a new museum project is expanding, a multi-million-dollar History Miami facility. That's a city with barely a century of history in its own right, but they associate its identity with international travel, the economic gateway to the Caribbean, the Bahamas, South and Central America. And next slide, please. And that brings us back to the project that we're embarked on at the Jacksonville History Center. Doesn't Jacksonville deserve something that better reflects this place's complicated history? I argue that it does, and I have been gratified by the really generous and enthusiastic support of our members, our donors, our civic leaders, people who really value what this city has to offer and value the record of the people who came before us here. That's the work that we do every day with the Jacksonville History Center. And man, it's job security because we keep making more history, right? And a more and more interesting history. Next image, please. And we take our work outside the walls of the building with historic site markers such as this one to commemorate significant events of the past. This commemorates one of the most dramatic civil rights confrontations of that era that took place in this city in August of 1960. The marker stands at the southwest corner of James Weldon Johnson Park, immediately across, appropriately, just immediately across Laura Street, just across Hogan Street from the U.S. Federal Courthouse. That's part of the work we do. I've barely scratched the surface. But I think I've probably reached the end of my allocated time. So I'm happy to take any questions or comments. You can straighten me out about anything that I got factually wrong. I'm always interested to hear people's interpretations and understandings of this place's past. So, and again, let me say thanks a million for inviting me. I really am grateful and honored to be able to share some of this with a group of people as great as Rotarians. You all are genuinely great Jacksonville citizens, and that matters a lot. Thank you all.
Alan, thank you for the presentation. Do you make available historical photographs to citizens for reproductions? And would that be a possible way to raise funds?
Where we've got
Historical Society.
Yeah, good question. And some of the photos in our collection, we have the unrestricted rights to reproduce and to sell, and we make them available for members, of course. In some cases, the collection, like the Florida Times Union collection, is restricted. We can share it for educational and informational purposes, but we don't have the rights to sell it. That was part of the deed of gift from the owners of the Florida Times Union. They didn't want to keep the photo collection. It was destined for the dumpster if I didn't take it. I didn't have room for it, but I took it anyway. But they apparently they were concerned that I might make some money off of it if I took it. So they put some handcuffs on the terms of the deed of gift. So I'm trying to renegotiate that deal.
And the second part is, where is the history of the fire department kept for the city of Jacksonville with old photographs and commemorative awards and that kind of thing, certificates of people that lost their life?
Yeah,
For example.
yeah. The JFRD has a history division, a documentary division, but like every department of city government, like every constitutional office, there is no single coherent set of policies or standards or custodial practices, or certainly no centralized facility for archiving that history. We have some of it. Some of it is in the hands of JFRD. Some of it was in the hands of a volunteer group called the Jacksonville Fire Museum. That was established as a nonprofit that I understand has now gone out of existence. They had the rights to occupy and use a decommissioned historic fire station that still stands on the Metropolitan Park West site on the river, pretty close to almost directly across from the jail and the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. The building stands, it's been moved twice, it's not occupied. I'm not aware of any intentions on the part of the city or any organization to program it. It was offered to us at one point. And as much as I love old fire stations and would love to activate it, I already have 4 historic buildings that I'm responsible for raising the money to take care of and maintain and improve. And so I had to very regretfully say, not today, not that fire museum, but I'm watching that situation with interest. At the time of the 50th anniversary of Jacksonville's consolidation, one of the members of the anniversary task force was a history representative from JFRD. So I know that that's a history-minded organization, and they have a tremendous, rich history to commemorate. So I'm always open to collaborations with them. But before I get too ambitious about taking in more collections, I need to finish renovating this building so we have a place to keep them safely and archive them and process them professionally and share them with the public, with researchers.
Alan,
Yes, sir.
over here.
Okay, yeah.
From a historical perspective, are you in agreement with moving the statue out of Confederate Park?
Oh, that's an old question related to something that's even been more recently in the news with reference to the statue, the monument in Springfield Park. The monument that was moved in what used to be known as Hemming Park, now James Weldon Johnson Park. That's the subject of your particular question, right?
No, the statue of the woman reading to the
Oh,
children.
okay, sorry, maybe I misunderstood you. Yeah, that's the more recent episode in what used to be known as Confederate Park, now known as Springfield Park. I'd say yes, although what I advocated, and I was part of a mayor's task force to make recommendations to the administration about what to do with Jacksonville's Confederate monuments, markers, and memorials. And really, it came down to just 4. The statue in James Weldon Johnson Park, the memorial in Springfield Park, and a Confederate bandstand in the Old City Cemetery and a historic site marker there. And we don't think that anything should be disturbed in cemeteries. That's, well enough left alone there. The local organization of the Sons of Confederate Veterans, the Kirby Smith chapter, maintains the Confederate Veterans burial plot in the Old City Cemetery, and they used to display the Confederate battle flag on a flagstaff there. They agreed to strike that, but as for the rest of it, no changes there. My recommendation to the mayor, which really took shape with a task force over a period of several months, was that if memorials to the Confederacy continue to stand on public property, doesn't matter what people do on private property, that's up to them, but on city-owned property, on public property, memorials to the Confederacy should, if they are allowed to stand, should be unflinchingly honest and truthful about the past. And what that means is that they have to acknowledge some of the fundamental facts about the Confederacy and some of the principles that lay behind it. First, the enforced enslavement of human beings is wrong, spiritually, ethically, morally, intellectually, or any other way you want to assess it. That's number 1. Number 2, the Confederate States of America was established to and fought the Civil War for the purpose of sustaining and perpetuating the enforced enslavement of human beings. If you acknowledge those fundamental facts, then you turn a memorial into a venue for education. And I don't know for sure, but I think that kind of sensitive and admittedly somewhat complicated interpretation might have gone a long way towards satisfying critics of those monuments on that site. That's not the policy that either the preceding mayor or the current mayor chose to follow. And I respect that decision. I understand it. Honestly, if those monuments had not been relocated, we would never have ended the public argument and discourse over their appropriateness on public property. So the outcome that we have is certainly, I know very well indeed, not entirely satisfying to everybody. In my role, I have had people during the years of the controversies when those monuments still stood, there were periodic arguments and campaigns and efforts mounted to remove them. And my phone would periodically light up, and so would my email, with people demanding to know, number one, why wasn't I down there chaining myself to the monument to protect it from being demolished? Or number two, why wasn't I down there on the back of a backhoe taking the monument down because of my role? So I'm pretty well acquainted with the polarization of opinion on that. The people who are the most ardent voices about that are people who have trouble hearing any other perspective than their own. And that's why I advocated for an interpretive way to make sure that if those monuments continue to stand, that they told a unflinchingly honest story. Other questions? I think I'm getting the, okay, I guess, yeah. Well, thank you all very much, as I say. Great to be here, great to be with you all. And I'll be interested to see whether West Jacksonville Rotary invites me back again in another several years. I would look forward to it. Thanks and have a great afternoon.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. So Alan, thank you very much. It's always fascinating to learn more about Jacksonville. It's certainly my home, and I can honestly say I never really appreciated it until I ended up in Statesboro, Georgia. Well, damn, Jacksonville's pretty great. But anyway, a couple of reminders before we get out today. Be sure to RSVP for the President's Party, which is June 26th. That is a Wednesday. There will be no lunch meeting that day. Instead, the President's Party here at Timuquana. We will send out an email with the time. I thought it was 6. I wasn't confident enough to go ahead and tell the entire group, but 6 o'clock here at Timuquana, June 26th, no lunch meeting that day. RSVP via DAC TV. Also, next week, let's go ahead and bring our money for tickets. We'll draw, hopefully until we get a winner. And our 3-year fundraiser for youth services. The drawing. Next week, our speaker will be Roger Handberg. He's a United States attorney, and it should be an excellent presentation. Now I'd like to ask Joe Eberly to lead us in the 4-way test.
Please repeat with me the things we think, say, or do. First,
It's the truth.
second,
It's a fair law to serve. We'll do a goodwill and better friendship.
and fourth.
Will be beneficial to all concerned.
Thank you very much, fellow Rotarians, for being here. Thank you for all of our guests for joining us. Hope they come back and see us. Let's go make the world a better place.